Please be advised that this serving of AIDS, the Lost Voices, may cause offense or upset, as...
I've got a bit of a potty mouth. I mean, I can't help it. Well, I can help it, but this subject just gets me so fired up that the odd swear word just falls out every now and again. Anyway, if you've got sensitive ears, or you're around people with sensitive ears, then perhaps tune in later. Don't tune in at all. Pop in some headphones. I don't give a Anyway, let's get this show started. Roll it.
AIDS brings a response
Fight
from the
against
government.
AIDS, the disease which claims lives.
Welcome to Extra Tea with your camp host, William Hampson.
And my fabulous co-host, Gloria.
Between us, we'll be looking back through the decades at how Britain reported on the AIDS pandemic.
And where we will try to unpick individual stories in the newspaper archives from the 80s, 90s and noughties.
Ready?
Ready.
All right, let's do it. Can I hang this here?
Yeah, it's fine. Just hang it
I
there.
think it'll have a better chance of drying.
So we're on, just so you know, and I should probably point out to the listeners that we've just had brunch in central London, and we got caught in a slight downpour, shall we say.
I very nearly called the RNLI, and that wasn't the worst part.
Such a drama queen. But no, it's the pong, isn't it,
Yeah.
from the Soho drains that hits you after a bit of rain. The drains just stink. Anyhow, enough chit-chat, shit-chat we should call it. Shall we get started?
Yes, you start, and hopefully I'll dry out.
Such a drama queen.
Really?
Stood there with a... Don't give me that look. Look like a bit of old driftwood that's been washed up.
You're such a shady bitch.
Anyway, okay, let's get started with this first story
that
hit the headlines on the 22nd of June, 1992. And when it did, it just exploded.
And I'm guessing not in a good way.
Oh, absolutely not, as we've come to learn. But this is a man who the media dubbed, and I quote, the AIDS time bomb.
Wow.
Then AIDS Romeo. And then AIDS Casanova. So you're probably getting a flavour for what they're alleging the story is. But the first story that broke dubbed him, well, why don't you introduce the article?
Okay. On June 22nd, 1992, the Birmingham Daily Post has the front page, exclusive, AIDS maniac on loose with a mission to kill. With the strapline, nightmare for city as woman dies and others are infected.
And the article reads, a Birmingham man is deliberately infecting women with the virus that leads to AIDS in revenge for getting the deadly disease himself. The unnamed man has knowingly infected several people in the city through having sex with them, and it is understood at least one person, a Solihull woman, has died. This week, doctors from South Birmingham Health Authority are to meet to discuss the case and whether there is anything they can do to stop the man claiming more victims. The case came to light while doctors from the authority were treating the Solihull woman who died about 6 weeks ago. Last night, health service sources confirmed they were looking into the case, thought to be the first in Britain. The source told the Birmingham Post that doctors were due to discuss the matter at a case conference during the next 2 or 3 days. They will be examining allegations that a man has deliberately infected at least 2 sexual partners with the HIV virus, which leads to AIDS, he said.
Is the key part of this article so far that these are just allegations?
Yeah, we know they're allegations. And when you read the entire article, you've already been judge, jury and executioner for this unnamed man, because the way they've dressed up the story to sensationalise it all is very typical of the press.
Yeah.
Anyhow, the allegations continue because the next day, on the 23rd of June 1992, in the Evening Post, under the headline, AIDS man had many partners, part of the article states, as health chiefs were meeting to decide what to do about the man, the 39-year-old woman alleged in today's Birmingham Post newspaper that the man knew he was HIV positive, but did not tell her. He insisted on going round and sleeping with whoever. I cannot imagine how many people have been infected, she was reported as saying. The woman, who lives in Birmingham, said, the man who gave it to me knew he was HIV positive and he didn't tell me. I laughed at the AIDS leaflets. I thought it would not happen to me.
So, this woman talking to the press has contracted HIV from her ex-boyfriend.
Yes, that's correct. And a bit of a spoiler, we'll come to learn as the articles continue that she's about to give birth to his child.
Oh, yikes. This sounds complicated.
Well, Gloria, if you think that's complicated, wait till the tabloids get hold of it, because things are about to get a whole lot more complicated.
Really?
Are you ready? Here we go. The Daily Mirror get hold of the story and alarmingly reveals everything on the 25th of June 1992. Now, this front page, and I quote, picture exclusive, has to be in my opinion, one of the worst front page headlines that I've ever seen.
Oh, no.
The headline runs across the whole of the front page in the style of a red rubber ink stamp where it states, "Warning."
That's awful.
And the strap headline reads, "Did you fall for him? If so, it could kill you." And on the right-hand side of the front page is a giant still picture taken from this man's wedding video with his new wife. And the article reads, AIDS time bomb Roy Corns smiles happily with bride Linda on his wedding day a few months ago. But last night the pair had fled into hiding as panic gripped more women who fear they may have caught the HIV virus from him. It was also revealed that Corns, who has denied having unprotected sex with any of his partners, has a 3-month-old son mothered by a previous girlfriend. And Linda, who wed 24-year-old haemophiliac Corns in January, has had 5 AIDS tests. Each has proved negative. Health counsellors in Birmingham were yesterday swamped with calls from worried women, several of whom mentioned Corns. But despite the furore, Linda will stand by him. Her mother, Gwendoline, 55, said, quote, "They're in love, aren't they?" Linda knew Roy was HIV positive when she agreed to marry him. It made absolutely no difference to her. She loves the bones of him, and he adores her. They use a condom when they make love. Of course they do. Jobless Corns, who claims all his sex partners knew he was HIV positive, says he has been totally faithful to Linda since their marriage.
The banner says, "The terror spreads after reckless HIV Romeo is revealed," with the headline, "The Web of Fear."
Have a pen and paper ready because it is quite hard to keep up.
And the strapline reads, 15 women, 1 dead lover, 2 babies, a mom-to-be, and her boyfriend, all caught in AIDS nightmare. Jeez. I hope you're going to break this down for us.
Oh, when you put it like that. I mean, all I'm going to do is read the newspaper articles, but I can help out along the way if you do get a little bit lost.
Okay.
Anyhow, this article reads, "The AIDS panic gripping Birmingham yesterday trapped an ever-increasing number of people in its web of fear. By last night, the terrifying accusations against handsome haemophiliac Roy Corns had touched the lives of 15 women, 2 babies, a mother-to-be, her boyfriend, and a dead lover.
Jeez.
As a result of Corns, 24, being identified yesterday, 10 frightened girls rang the city's AIDS lifeline for help. They follow in the footsteps of 3 who are already confirmed HIV positive after allegedly having unprotected sex with the AIDS, quote, time bomb. Corns' new wife Linda, they married in January, regularly undergoes nerve-wracking tests for the potentially deadly virus. She is in the clear so far. The 15th woman caught in the web is the mother of Corns' 3-month-old love child, a former girlfriend named only as Tina. Heartbroken Tina, 20, became pregnant by the HIV-positive haemophiliac last summer, but he dumped her and married old school friend Linda while Tina was carrying his child. Corns' mother Audrey said yesterday, "I believe both Tina and the baby had HIV tests, but we have not heard anything. And we don't see them now Roy is married."
So, let me get this straight in my head. There are 15 women so far.
Right, to make it easier, forget the quote 10 frightened girls who called the helpline as nothing comes of those later in the stories. So
Okay.
forget those. Won't be surprised if the newspaper just made them up, but
Yeah.
forget the 10 frightened girls. So that takes the 15 down to 5. So Roy's wife Linda, she's testing negative, but she's in what the newspaper called the web of fear. Ex-girlfriend Tina, who has tested HIV positive and has just given birth to a child she claims is Roy's and is called Daniel, is 2. Ex-girlfriend, 39-year-old Lynette Russell, who is HIV positive and is the one who broke the story to the press and named Roy, is the 3rd. And the article goes on. The last of the original 4 unnamed victims whose plight was revealed by Birmingham health bosses was Gina Allen. Another of Corners' old flames, she died of AIDS last month at the age of 20, looking, quote, almost unrecognisable.
So, Gina is the 4th?
Yes, and it's not that we're callously numbering these individuals. It's just trying to decipher the facts from the sensationalist language of the Daily Mirror. And the article continues, "It is this link with Gina that drags 3 more victims into the web of fear. A man, a woman, and an unborn baby. For after she split up with Corns, HIV-infected Gina lived for 2 years with another lover, Clive Barley. He was horrified to learn this week what really killed Gina. Now, 28-year-old Clive of Yardley Wood lives in fear for himself, his new girlfriend Helena Freeman, she's the fifth, and the baby she is expecting in 2 months.
Okay, I think I'm up to speed.
Okay, good. It is confusing, but the 5 women concerned are the 3 exes: Gina, who sadly passed away from AIDS; Lynette, who's given the story to the newspaper and who received a government compensation payout for contracting HIV/AIDS; and Tina, with baby Daniel too. The 4th being his current wife, Linda, who's testing negative for the moment. And then the 5th, Helena Freeman, who has had absolutely no relationship with Roy, but her partner, Clive, was involved sexually in a relationship with Gina for a number of years after Gina had split from Roy. So they're worried Gina may have passed HIV to Clive, and thus Clive unknowingly passing it to Helena and their unborn child.
Wow.
And the article goes on. Corns, 24, contracted the virus 7 years ago from contaminated blood products used to treat his haemophilia. His brother Gary was infected the same way and has passed HIV on to his girlfriend and baby. Both brothers were paid £23,000 from a government compensation fund. But the Romeo at the centre of Birmingham AIDS nightmare insisted all his sex partners knew he was HIV positive. Corns further denied having unprotected sex and claimed that any relationships he may have had were well before my marriage. But his protests were angrily disputed by the woman who revealed his identity, ex-lover Lynette Russell. Bitter Lynette, 39, of Ladywood, claimed she questioned him about AIDS and haemophiliacs. I asked him if he would wear a condom, but he just laughed and said there was no need. I believed him, especially when he told me, if you loved me, you'd trust me enough not to ask. As an HIV-positive sex partner of a haemophiliac, Lynette, the mother of 2 children aged 16 and 12, also received cash from the government fund.
So, Roy is a hemophiliac and received contaminated blood products 7 years ago, around 1985.
Yes, so around 1985, Roy would have been around 16, 17 years old.
And the following day, on June 26, 1992, on the front page of the Daily Mirror is the headline, AIDS man's love child has killer virus.
Yes, and it's beside a photo of Roy with the caption, in hiding. And the article reads, the secret love child of AIDS time bomb, Roy Corns, is HIV positive, it was revealed last night. His former lover, Tina Orme, broke down as she told how she and Daniel have both been diagnosed as having the virus. The 3-month-old child was born after Corns had married Linda Gray. Corns had lived through a stormy relationship with Tina, which broke up when he met Linda last year, and she was already pregnant. Tina was speaking after it was revealed that Corns tried to sell his sleazy story to down-market newspapers for £75,000.
Down-market?
Exactly, and I'm only giggling because it's funny that the Daily Mirror thinks they're not included in that category of being a down-market newspaper.
I thought that.
Anyhow, the article continues inside the Daily Mirror, and Gina's grandmother gives comment to the claims that Roy is willing to sell his story, and the article states, Gina's grandmother Rose said, quote, she was my life, and now someone is trying to make a fortune from it. It's sick.
But Roy wasn't the one to break this story, essentially defaming himself.
Exactly. And you know, allegations to one side, Roy didn't approach the newspapers. The local authority has placed him and his new wife Linda in hiding, and this no doubt and does have a damaging effect on his personal and professional reputation, which I'd say he'd have a right to be compensated for if, you know, it was successful in a legal claim as defamation.
I agree.
And a prime example of this is how this article concludes. The fear of AIDS swept through a car parts factory last night. Workers at Sturchley, Birmingham, are frightened they could be victims of the AIDS scare. Corns worked at the factory for 7 months.
Ah, I see what you mean.
It's growing, isn't it? And 5 days after the story first broke, and 4 days after Roy was named in the media in this upmarket newspaper, the Daily Mirror, they publish a column with the headline, quote, I'm sorry, Mum, by the AIDS time bomb. And it reads, sex time bomb Roy Corns uttered his first words of regret yesterday for the AIDS nightmare he created. He told his mum he was sorry, after passing on the virus to at least 4 women, one of whom has died. I think it has finally sunk in, said Audrey Corns, 52. He's really upset. He feels very frightened. He's had to go into hiding.
I bet he is frightened. Roy's how old again? 24?
Yes, 24, and having to look at an AIDS diagnosis in 1992, likely outcome being death. And your name all of a sudden appears against all these allegations, not only in local newspapers, but across the national newspapers and tabloids.
Well, it's understandable he is frightened and upset. Do they say why he's had to go into hiding?
You kind of would think that it was obvious, but I don't think we've covered this yet from the articles. Many state that the local authority and social services assisted in relocating Roy and Linda, given there were genuine credible threats to their lives. To quote, there was hits put out on Roy involving shotguns, which had been intercepted by many of the reports from the local authority.
And did any more people come out of the woodwork?
Well, funny you ask, because the very next article, the very next day, in the upmarket Daily Mirror, was another front page exclusive. Now, the headline reads, AIDS lover sensation docked new 4 years ago, with the strapline, "My stop him plea was ignored," says girlfriend.
Interesting.
Now, I'm not going to read the whole article, but this is Tina Freeman, who claims she told authorities that Roy was having unprotected sex while knowing he was a carrier of HIV. But her story can really be summed up in this section of the article that states, Tina, 30, bitterly regrets sleeping with Corns. And she is quoted as saying, "A few people told me he was HIV positive, but I didn't believe it because I'd known him for years before our fling," said Tina from Selly Park, Birmingham, who was seduced by Corns after a night in a pub. "After we'd slept together a couple of times, I found out the truth and was absolutely devastated. When I asked him about AIDS, he laughed it off and said, 'That's rubbish.'"
But to be fair, she cannot claim as she does, "I found out the truth," because by her own admission, she stated, "A few people told me he was HIV positive.
And I didn't believe it," is how that
Exactly.
ends. I mean, she says she wasn't told by just one person to perhaps disregard it as hearsay or malicious, but she says a few people told her that Roy was HIV positive. So what's that, 3 people minimum?
Yeah.
And when she says, quote, truth, she implies she's been told an untruth at some point, when she hadn't, because she says, quote, "A few told her Roy was HIV positive," which was the truth because he was. And Tina Freeman then says that she confronted Roy about his HIV, quote, "after we'd slept together a couple of times." Look, I don't mean to sound harsh, but if a, quote, few people told me someone was HIV positive, I think I'd ask them before having unprotected or unsafe sex, and not after, to quote her own words, a couple of times. And like Judge Judy says,
because what you're saying doesn't make sense. And if something doesn't make sense, it's not true.
You're such a shady bitch.
Shady bitch. Anyhow, Tina Freeman tests negative after all that. She tests negative for HIV.
Awesome.
And she is said to be relieved. And I guess it is testimony like this that would fall apart in court and make deliberate transmission somewhat hard to prove.
That's one way of looking at it.
And as the weeks go on, articles start emerging that perhaps don't sensationalise nor entirely vilify Roy and even question the role of women failing to protect themselves.
That's interesting.
Anne Robinson, on the 1st of July 1992, in her weekly column in the Daily Mirror, in her sharp and direct style, shared it was confusing to keep up with all the titles the media had given Roy. She highlighted the issue around some of the sensationalist language and hysteria, where Anne states, "By Friday, the web of fear had stretched to a car parts factory in Sturchley outside Birmingham, where Roy Corns used to work. How anyone thinks car parts factory workers might have become HIV positive by working alongside Roy Corns or having a drink with him after work is another matter. By the time several of the women who had slept with Roy Corns had discussed their love life publicly." Now, in the same newspaper, Daily Mirror, on the same day, the 1st of July 1992, medical correspondent Jill Palmer, who covers many HIV/AIDS stories over the years, dedicated a full page titled "Women We Must Learn." And within it, she says of the women affected by Roy, "The women were also acting irresponsibly. They may not have known he was HIV positive, but they could not be sure he wasn't. No man can willfully infect a woman with HIV without her agreement. Unsafe sex is not something you can do on your own. Both partners decide whether they are going to use a condom."
It's a bit of an archaic view.
Really, I do feel that what she says there is still relevant today, in that the HIV/AIDS Don't Die of Ignorance campaign wasn't just targeting gay men, it wasn't just targeting men, it was targeting everybody in society.
Anyone can get it, man or woman. If you ignore AIDS, it could be the death of you. So don't die of ignorance.
And there have been a few successful claims of reckless transmission in the UK courts in recent years that have ended in prison sentences. Darryl Rowe in 2018. If anybody wants to learn more about that story, quick plug here for the two ladies over at TVPS, Sarah and Jess, who run and host and produce the HIV podcast. They did a mini-series on crime, and they covered deliberate and reckless transmission. Darryl Rowe was one of them, but there's quite a few other ones as well. So head over to the HIV podcast to check those out.
Okay.
I do feel that it is 50-50 equal, that they both had a responsibility, Roy and the woman that he was sleeping with, to protect each other and protect themselves.
And did I see there was a motion tabled in the Houses of Parliament about Roy appearing on television?
Oh my gosh, yes. This comes no surprise to some, Labour MP Joe Ashton, who tabled the motion on the 6th of July 1992 and was heavily supported by other Labour MPs, read that this House deplores the reports that Mr. Roy Corns, an HIV carrier who knowingly infected...
It doesn't sound good, does
that's dangerous language, because it wasn't proven that he'd knowingly infected 4 women in Birmingham, one of whom died, is said to have been paid $10,000 by Granada Television to appear on so-called Richard and Judy show last Sunday. Notes that he claimed the newspaper reports about him to be untrue. Wonders, therefore, why he is not sued for libel. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of the law, but I think I'd be suing Joe Ashton's ass for libel, saying that, if I was Roy, I'd knowingly infected 4 women when it's not been proven, but it's another story.
Who's Richard and Judy?
Richard and Booby. They were a husband. They were a national treasure. Let's say no more about it. Moving on, swiftly, moving on.
So this MP's issue is that Roy is being paid for this TV appearance.
Yeah, it seems so. And if I'm honest, I don't see what the issue with it is. After all, it was Lynette.
Yeah.
39-year-old Lynette, who broke the story to the Birmingham Post and then spoke to the tabloids, and she was the one that named Roy specifically and outed him, and in the process telling everybody that he'd infected her with HIV. And these were just allegations. Nothing is proven. She's got nothing to back them up. And she lost her job as a result, she says in the newspapers, because of the ignorance and stigma around HIV at the time. So if she can't work, and Roy can't work because he's having to live in hiding, and he's not going to be able to get a job because his face is all over the national newspaper.
Good point.
Because of the ignorance and stigma around HIV and AIDS, then how else is he supposed to make a living? And as for the TV appearance itself, this poor guy has said very little in the newspapers, except for the odd denial of the allegations here and there, whereas the women seem to have 1, 2, 3-page spreads all about their feelings and emotions and their sex life with Roy Corns.
Yeah.
Whether they were paid or not is immaterial, because in a democracy, Roy has a right to reply to all the allegations made against him, and what better way for him to have his say than an invite onto television? And I would imagine that he was the one that was approached by these television companies to come and give their stories, and were perhaps offering these sums of money.
Did anything come of it?
Well, Roy's own MP, Lynn Jones, sought the wording of the motion to be amended. She included wording such as alleged in regard to the allegations made that Roy infected others. But the Birmingham Mail reported that evening, quote, Mr. Major said he did not know what was happening in the Birmingham case, but the problem was that making HIV a notifiable disease would drive it underground. There is a general dilemma, said Mr. Major, but no one will push to one side the problem which arises.
Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty?
Anyway, moving on.
Okay.
Fast forward to November 1992, and it's reported that Roy's mother, Audrey Corns, who has 3 daughters and 5 sons, all 5 sons coincidentally are haemophiliacs, including Roy, 3 of which received HIV-contaminated blood products. Roy, the youngest, who is now 25 years old, Audrey's firstborn Gordon is 38 years old, and Gary, who sadly passes away on the 8th of November 1992, aged only 26 years old.
That is sad.
And the 2-page spread in the Daily Mirror on the 18th of November 1992 shares the family's pain at the loss of Gary Corns. And the article shares that the sensation around Roy in the press and these stories had put a wedge between Gary and his brother Roy, but they had made up for an early Christmas they had organised for Gary, given they were aware he'd most likely not make Christmas. Audrey shared she only learned all 3 boys had HIV from contaminated blood products 2 years prior, given the boys agreed not to tell their mum to avoid her unnecessary worry. Audrey shared, "What can I say? I don't know which girls my son went with or what he told them, but I do know he's not a monster. Roy would never harm anyone deliberately. I don't think he quite realised what it was he'd got. He was just a kid of 18 when he was diagnosed."
I can believe that. If we all take ourselves back to when we were 18, in the UK you're legally an adult. You can leave home and do your own thing.
Being responsible isn't usually something a word associated with most 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
I think we've all done something careless and reckless when we were 18, 19.
And it is interesting that in many of these articles, many say they had heard of HIV and AIDS, but didn't fully appreciate what it was.
Exactly, and in most instances, they're older than Roy, and they're saying that, I wasn't really interested, I didn't take much notice. Because, as it was reported then, and is widely accepted now, HIV/AIDS was branded by the media and society as a, quote, gay disease, the, quote, gay plague. Look back at what Tina Orme said about the leaflet that formed part of the £20 million Don't Die of Ignorance campaign in 1997. She said, and I quote, "I laughed at the AIDS leaflet. I thought it would not happen to me."
And in December 1992, Roy remarks on the UK government's stance not to change laws around reckless HIV infections.
Yes, Roy is quoted in the Daily Mirror on the 16th of December 1992 as saying he'd welcome a change in the law, and is quoted as saying, "The important word is deliberately. I did not do that. I was very young and I didn't get any counselling about the dangers. The doctors didn't explain it to me properly."
So what happens next?
Well, as you can imagine, stories that keep rumbling on in the national press can damage your reputation.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like the local Birmingham media, where it seems there isn't a week that goes by where Roy is at the centre of a story. But in August 1993, Birmingham's Finest published several articles that Roy and Linda have applied for IVF treatment on the NHS. Roy and the health authority shared this is a good way of the couple having a baby and minimises the risk of HIV transmission to both mother and baby through the natural way of conceiving a child.
And it seems like a very mature decision to make in light of all that's been written about Roy.
Well, I'd say so, yes. Reports state that the couple still practice safe sex, hence why they cannot conceive, and therefore demonstrates the precautions Roy and Linda are taking. And the treatment is said to be pioneering at the time and was suggested to them by a doctor. Roy is quoted in the Birmingham Mail on the 23rd of August 1993 as saying, "It makes me very angry knowing there are a lot of people who think of me as the so-called AIDS maniac. We haven't taken this decision lightly. We love each other very much and Linda is desperate to have a child. It's hard knowing that we're racing against time for the treatment to be successful, but at the same time, it has given me a great sense of hope for the future."
And reading some of the other articles, it seems the newspapers took issue with his treatment being on the national health.
For Roy, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly.
Here he is looking at other options that are a lot safer in regards to not passing on the virus, and he's still getting knocked for it. And it seems that the media took it upon themselves to approach the health minister at the time, Baroness Cumberledge, for a comment. And she said, I quote, "It is up to the individual health authorities to decide whether to make infertility services available on the NHS. Whether this couple is accepted for IVF is a matter of judgment for them." And that was published in the Birmingham Mercury on the 22nd of August 1993.
Then, in December 1993, Roy is back in the press after appearing on a Channel 4 documentary titled The Plague. It's the Birmingham Mercury that broke the story on December 12, 1993, with the headline, "I'm sorry for giving you AIDS."
That's right, and partway through the article it states, "Looking much thinner than when the scandal broke, he, Roy, says, I admit I took a chance and I feel sorry for the women I have infected, but I haven't infected those hundreds that they claim. They've made me out to be a monster, which I am not. When I was first diagnosed, I thought, I'm all right, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't think of it as a life-threatening disease. I thought it was like any other illness which I would overcome eventually. The government didn't publicise about AIDS then. I just got on with life."
Correct me if I'm wrong. Roy's not apologizing to the women, but merely showing empathy for the way things turned out.
No, I don't think he is, and this might sound controversial, but I would say, why should he? He didn't ask to be infected with HIV. It wasn't his making. Yes, he admits he didn't take much notice, but you have to ask, why wasn't he counselled properly when diagnosed?
I did wonder.
Regardless of what we think, the article here is from someone directly affected.
Okay.
Lynette Russell, the 39-year-old, where the article states, but 40-year-old mother of two, Lynette Russell, who is HIV positive as a result of an affair with him and who first exposed him, said yesterday he may not have known the dangers, but that's because he didn't bother to find out.
Sorry to interrupt. Interestingly, Lynette isn't saying, no, he was fully aware of the dangers and consequences.
Yeah, it's as though she herself, living in the same area, heterosexual like Roy, agrees there wasn't much information about the dangers of HIV. I mean, she's not even saying Roy has no excuse because in 1987 there was the national campaign, so how can he not know? And it perhaps just goes to show that targeting just the gays and drug users wasn't the way to raise awareness about a disease that affects anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
Staying with Lynette's response, the article continues, because he didn't bother to find out, I know he didn't turn up for a lot of hospital appointments for counselling. It's quite a turnaround for him to say he's sorry, but it doesn't make any difference to me. I didn't feel sorry for him.
And Lynette was the one who initially broke the story and named Roy.
Yes, exactly. And the Daily Mirror labelled Lynette as bitter, and she still sounds it. And I'm not knocking her. She has every right to be upset.
Oh, awkward silence.
Well, I can't help but think a lot of this anger from Lynette is perhaps with herself.
Oh, elephant in the room.
No, look, I'm not vilifying Lynette nor stigmatising her or wanting to allude that I'm blaming her in any way whatsoever, but Lynette says Roy gave her HIV in 1989 when she was 36 years old, a single mother of two teenage children. And Roy, a 21-year-old young man that Judge Judy would say isn't cooked, isn't mature until at least 25. I just can't find any sympathy for her taking the moral high ground and so publicly by burdening Roy with all the alleged responsibility for her contracting HIV from him, if it was him. As a woman 15 years older, I can't help but think she's angry with herself that she didn't perhaps treat Roy like one of her teenagers by saying, that thing isn't coming anywhere near me until you put a condom on it.
Good point.
She says herself this was a one-off, a fling-style sexual encounters that went on for around 3 months. Surely she'd have wanted to protect herself from any other STIs, either from Roy's past encounters or even the ones that Roy's having alongside Lynette. I just can't help but think that she perhaps knows that, you know, she had a role to play in this, so to speak.
You raised some good points, but surely Roy had a responsibility to be upfront about his HIV status.
I agree. I'm not saying that, but I think this is classic it takes two to tango, and surely the burden of responsibility is 50-50. As much as Roy had to be open about his HIV status, if he understood it, if he was armed with the facts that he received from the health authority, the local authority, you know, from his doctor, his clinician, whoever was looking after him, whether it was from the haemophilia side, whether it was a newly assigned doctor from the HIV/AIDS side, or whether they were combined. Lynette, as one of the articles stated earlier, could have easily insisted on safer sex as a prevention measure. Lynette, in one article, describes Roy as, and I quote, a very lonely kid. If that's the case, why on earth, as a 36-year-old woman, are you having sex with him?
I agree.
If at 21, she's referring to him as a kid, perhaps alluding to the level of maturity of an average 21-year-old, then hello?
Do you know what happened next to Lynette?
Well, Lynette gave an interview to the Birmingham Mercury on the 18th of July 1993. In it, she talks candidly about how the community responded to recognising her from all the media coverage of the story, which she brought to the press, and Lynette was treated appallingly.
Oh, no.
She should not have been subjected to what she says she was. She talks about being set upon by a gang of men and beaten so badly that she ends up in hospital because they recognised her from
That's
the
truly
newspapers
awful.
as the, quote, AIDS woman. Teenagers outside a phone box scream for people not to use it as the, quote, AIDS woman
That's
just
awful.
used it. And she has been shunned by all her local pubs because customers and landlords fear they might catch AIDS from the pint glasses.
No
She
way.
lost her job for similar reasons around HIV ignorance and stigma, and her children were severely bullied at school.
Oh no, that's truly awful.
Lynette did, by chance, find love when being chatted up by a man called Tony, where Lynette says, I told him, don't bother, I've got HIV. And he just looked at me and said, well, that's okay, because I am too. And in 1993, Lynette says she is losing weight and thinks she's now in the, quote, full-blown AIDS stage, with death just around the corner.
And?
Well, that was 1993, and we know art, antiretroviral therapy, came along in 1996, and Lynette must have taken this up as she moved from Birmingham to Stoke-on-Trent in the early 2000s, where she lived until her death in the winter of 2016, aged 65 years old.
And do you know what happened to Tina Orme and her baby Daniel, who were both HIV positive?
Yes, this is an interesting one that left me baffled.
Baffled?
Yes, because on the 28th of December 1993, the Birmingham Mail runs the headline, HIV man's baby clear, and the article reads, "The baby of Birmingham HIV carrier Roy Corns has been cleared of the virus and is now a happy and healthy child," experts have revealed. The baby's mother, Tina Orme, aged 21, who was infected by 26-year-old Mr. Corns, said she was delighted with the result, which followed 6 positive tests on her baby. Miss Ormes said, "I always lived in hope that a small miracle could happen." She said the doctors told her there was a small chance that her son Daniel's system would be able to fight back against the virus, which can lead to AIDS. Miss Orme added, "The doctors always said they could not tell for certain about the HIV in Daniel until he was 18 months old. And although all his previous tests had been HIV positive, I always had hope that his own immune system would take over." Daniel is now 20 months old. His father has married another woman, Linda Gray, and they have said they hope to have their own children. The definitive medical test on 20-month-old toddler was carried out in November at Birmingham Heartlands Hospital. A baby carries its mother's antibodies in its bloodstream for up to 18 months until the infant's immune system is fully functional. Miss Orme heard the good news just before Christmas. And there's a cute little photograph of baby Daniel in the article as well.
Well, that's very considerate of the virus to just vacate when the child's immune system is up and running.
Yeah, but I'm not understanding if this is even possible or if this is even true. I mean, I found nothing on the internet to confirm this. AIDSmap produced the following article in 2017 where it states, "The potential to eliminate HIV infection in infants treated soon after birth was first reported in 2013, when researchers discovered that a baby treated with antiretrovirals within days of birth appeared to have cleared HIV infection. The so-called Mississippi baby, identified by doctors in the US state after her mother tested positive for HIV at the time of delivery, showed no traces of HIV when tested 23 months after birth and 5 months after interrupting treatment." But in this case, we're talking about 1992. This happened in 2013, when there was no effective treatment in 1992. So I don't know, I find it hard to believe. I don't know what to think.
Maybe the 6 positive tests on baby Daniel were not accurate.
Do you know, I don't know. I'm truly baffled on this one. One, it sounds really exciting, and two, it's just confusing. I don't know. Is it possible? Does it work? Does it not work? I don't know. Anybody knows, then drop us a line, because I'm really intrigued to know if this is true, if it was possible in 1992. However, Tina goes on to marry in 1994, and she gave her husband's surname to baby Daniel. And from research, Tina is still thriving. Son Daniel is married and seems to have started a family of his own. So it's an amazing outcome given the outlook and life expectancy in the decade that this story broke.
And what happened to Roy Corns?
On the 27th of May 1994, aged 26 years old, Roy Corns sadly passes away in hospital. Roy died of AIDS-related tuberculosis, and his wife Linda shared his final moments with the People newspaper on 21st of August 1994, where she stated, "All I could do was hold his hand. I kept telling him how much I loved him, and if he needed to go and the pain was too much, then he should give in and go." He died at 12:43 a.m. that night. His sister, mum, and 2 of his brothers were at his bedside. And Linda tested negative several times months after Roy had passed away, and she never remarried, even though Linda shared that Roy, knowing he would die one day, had told her, and I quote, "to meet someone and enjoy my life after he was gone." Linda sadly passed away on the 28th of December 2016, aged 49 years old.
And you mentioned earlier that Roy's brother Gordon was also HIV positive through contaminated blood products.
Yes, and there was another brother, John Corns, who is a haemophiliac, but was not infected with HIV, although he was infected with hepatitis through contaminated blood, which has since cleared with treatment. John stoically made a stand for his brothers and the entire Corns family by providing both a written and oral testimony to the recent infected blood inquiry. At the inquiry, he shared he had lost Roy in 1994 and their brother Gordon, who sadly passed away 18 months after Roy in December 1995. We can take a listen to John Corns speaking to Channel 4 News and then to ITV News. But first, John Corns told the infected blood inquiry, "I can remember Gary saying
he's got to go to the hospital for some tests, talking about HIV. None of us knew at the time what HIV was. All we kept thinking it was some sort of cancer, which they'd be able to cure. And I can remember the day came, all of us went over to the house, and he was sobbing his heart out, and he actually said he thinks he looks as if though he's going to die."
And there was Roy, who was at the centre of worldwide media attention after he was accused of deliberately infecting women with HIV, one of whom later died from AIDS. John Corns told me this had a terrible impact on the family.
It was a shock to we didn't know anything about it until it actually happened, until she actually died. We didn't know what, and there was no warnings or anything. Roy didn't realise. He didn't realise at all. He was just a kid. We did not know to what extent HIV and AIDS were at the time. And that's one of the reasons I'm here now, because I'm defending my family.
7,500 people are thought to have been infected. 4,800 were haemophiliacs. There were others too, from transfusions or during childbirth or from their partners. This inquiry is to find out how it happened and who knew the blood was infected. John Corns' hepatitis C has cleared, but it has left him with cirrhosis of the liver, and he was recently taken to hospital after vomiting blood.
When I was told I had Hep C, I thought at the time, well, it's not like HIV or AIDS, it's not going to kill us. And it is killing us. I've been cleared of the Hep C. It's just the cirrhosis, which is my liver's getting worse and worse. So I've got to try and enjoy and play people up as much as I can. That's what I want to do.
It's believed nearly 2,500 people have died as a result. Today, the inquiry that will hear testimony from around the country heard John's story.
It ripped us apart. Especially the press. The press was the biggest culprit of ripping us apart. We were called the AIDS family when we had every type of scum word written on the doors, on the walls.
The Corns family had been infected through no fault of their own, but became outcasts. Roy was branded a maniac in newspaper headlines. Gary, seen here in 1992 with the wife and daughter he unwittingly infected with HIV, said he felt he had killed them.
I feel murder. I'm a murderer. I've killed her life. It's something I've felt very, very bitter about.
The infected blood inquiry is trying to establish why people died and how the authorities responded. For many families, it's welcome but long overdue.
They've had the evidence for years, since the 60s, lots of evidence. That we still have to go through this process.
John suffers with illness every day. He only hopes that by speaking out now, he can get justice for those who didn't survive this long. Damon Green, ITV News, in Leeds.
It's affected this, not just me, because I've got problems, or one of my brothers who's got the same problem as me. I've got another brother who hasn't got haemophilia and a sister who hasn't got haemophilia. I've got loads of nephews and nieces from the brothers that have died, and I've got nephews that haven't got a mother or a father. So it's affected at least 30 of the family.
All of the actual newspaper articles mentioned in this serving are available on the Extra T blog. You can find the link below in the show notes. If you've enjoyed listening to AIDS, The Lost Voices, then don't be a shady bitch and show us some love with
a big fat like,
a comment,
a share, as in the link, not as in, do you believe in life after love? Oh.
And for fuck's sake, don't forget to
subscribe and follow.